3 months ago, I walked into a pawn shop looking for a birthday gift and saw my dead grandmother's engagement ring behind the glass counter staring back at me. I stood there frozen, staring at that familiar sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds that had been in my family for 3 generations. My hands started shaking as I approached the counter, hoping somehow I was wrong, that it was just a similar ring. But when I got closer, I could see the tiny chip on one of the diamonds that happened when my grandmother accidentally knocked it against her kitchen sink 40 years ago. There was no mistaking it. The pawn shop owner was this middle-aged guy with kind eyes who immediately noticed my distress. When I explained the situation, he pulled out his records and showed me that someone had sold it just 2 weeks earlier. The name on the paperwork made my stomach drop to the floor. It was my husband's signature, clear as day. I'd been married to him for 8 years. We met in college, dated for 3 years, got married in a small ceremony at my parents' house. He was the guy who brought me soup when I was sick, who remembered my favorite coffee order, who cried during romantic movies. The man I thought I knew better than anyone in the world had stolen from me and sold something irreplaceable. The drive home felt like the longest 20 minutes of my life. I kept thinking about all the little things that suddenly made sense. How he'd been working late more often, how he'd become secretive about his phone, how he'd started doing the laundry more frequently, which meant he was handling my jewelry box regularly. I felt like such an idiot for not seeing the signs. When I got home, he was sitting on the couch watching a basketball game like nothing had happened. I walked straight to our bedroom and opened my jewelry box with trembling fingers. The ring was definitely gone, but so were other pieces I hadn't noticed: my grandmother's pearl earrings, a gold bracelet my mother gave me for my college graduation, and a necklace that had been a wedding gift from my best friend. I sat on the edge of our bed trying to process what was happening. This wasn't just about money. These were pieces of my history, my family, my most precious memories. My grandmother had worn that engagement ring for 53 years until the day she died. She'd specifically left it to me because I was the only granddaughter who'd shown interest in family history and traditions. The confrontation was brutal. When I showed him the pawn shop receipt, he tried to deny it at first, then broke down crying and admitted everything. He'd been gambling online for months, starting small with sports betting but gradually getting deeper into casino games and poker. He'd lost thousands of dollars, money we didn't have. Our savings account was nearly empty, and he'd been taking cash advances on credit cards I didn't know about. He begged for forgiveness, promised he'd get help, swore it would never happen again. But I couldn't get past the fact that he'd stolen from me. Not just money, but irreplaceable family heirlooms. He'd looked me in the eye every day for weeks, knowing what he'd done, watching me get ready for work at my jewelry box, knowing those precious pieces were gone forever. I told him I needed space to think and went to stay with my sister for a few days. She was furious when I told her what happened. She'd never particularly liked him anyway and had always thought he was hiding something. During those 3 days, I barely slept or ate. I kept thinking about our entire relationship, wondering what else he'd hidden from me, what other lies I'd been living with. When I came back home, I found him packing his clothes into suitcases. He said he'd found a treatment program for gambling addiction and was going to stay with his brother while he got help. Part of me felt relieved that he was finally taking responsibility, but mostly I just felt empty and betrayed. Update 1 posted 6 weeks later. I thought I'd give you all an update since so many people reached out with support and advice. The past month and a half has been an emotional roller coaster that I never could have predicted. First, about the jewelry. I was able to buy back my grandmother's ring from the pawn shop, though it cost me almost twice what he'd sold it for. The other pieces were already gone, sold to private buyers, but getting that ring back felt like recovering a piece of my soul. I wear it on a chain around my neck now, close to my heart where it belongs. My husband completed his treatment program, which was actually more intensive than I'd expected. It wasn't just about gambling. They worked on underlying issues like anxiety and depression that he'd been hiding from me for years. He came back after 6 weeks looking healthier but also like a completely different person. The man I married had been carrying secrets that were eating him alive. Here's where things get complicated though. While he was gone, I started going through our financial records more carefully, and I discovered something that changed everything. The gambling addiction was real, but it wasn't the whole story. There were regular transfers from our joint account to another account I'd never seen before. When I tracked it down, I found out he'd been sending money to his ex-girlfriend for the past 2 years. I confronted him about it when he came back, and that's when he finally told me the truth that he'd been hiding since before we got married. His ex had a daughter, his daughter. She was 9 years old now, and he'd been secretly paying child support because he was terrified of how I'd react to finding out he had a child. I can't even describe the mix of emotions I felt. Anger that he'd lied to me for years, confusion about why he thought I wouldn't accept his daughter, and heartbreak that he'd chosen to handle it this way instead of trusting me with the truth. But underneath all of that was something unexpected, relief that finally all the secrets were out in the open. The gambling had started as a way to try to make extra money to cover both the child support and our regular expenses. When he lost instead of winning, he got desperate and started selling my jewelry to cover his losses and keep making the payments. It was like one lie had built on top of another until his whole life was a house of cards. We had the most honest conversation we'd ever had in our 8 years together. He told me about his daughter, how smart she was, how much she looked like him, how guilty he felt about not being able to be a real father to her. He showed me pictures on his phone and I could see the love and pain in his eyes as he talked about her. The crazy part is that if he just told me the truth from the beginning, I would have supported him. Yes, I would have been surprised and maybe a little hurt that he kept it from me, but I would never have asked him to abandon his responsibilities to his child. The fact that he thought I would tells me how little he actually knew me, even after all these years together. Update 2, posted 3 months later. I know it's been a while since my last update, but I needed time to process everything that's happened. Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them, and the past few months have been full of surprises I never saw coming. My husband and I decided to try couples counseling, not necessarily to save our marriage, but to figure out how to move forward in whatever way was healthiest for both of us. Our counselor was this wise older woman who didn't let either of us get away with avoiding the hard conversations. She helped us understand that our marriage had been built on a foundation of secrets and assumptions rather than genuine communication. During one of our sessions, something unexpected happened. I was talking about how betrayed I felt, not just about the gambling and the jewelry, but about the secret daughter, when I realized I was angry for the wrong reasons. I wasn't angry that he had a child, I was angry that he'd robbed me of the chance to be part of that child's life. I'd always wanted kids, and here was this little girl who could have been like a stepdaughter to me if he'd just been honest. That realization led to the most difficult conversation we'd ever had. He broke down and admitted that he'd been so ashamed of his past, so convinced that he wasn't good enough for me, that he'd spent our entire marriage trying to be someone he thought I wanted instead of just being himself. The gambling, the lies, the secret payments, it all stemmed from his deep-seated belief that the real him wasn't worthy of love. But here's the plot twist that nobody saw coming, including me. During this whole process of rebuilding trust and honesty, I discovered something about myself that I'd been suppressing for years. All those times I'd felt like something was missing in our relationship, all those moments when I'd wondered if this was really the life I wanted, it wasn't just because he was hiding things from me. It was because I was hiding things from myself. I realized I was gay. Not bisexual, not questioning gay. Looking back, all the signs were there, but I'd convinced myself that what I felt was just admiration for other women, or that every woman probably felt that way sometimes. I'd buried those feelings so deep that I genuinely believed I was happy in my marriage to a man. The night I finally admitted this to myself, I sat in my car in our driveway for 2 hours, crying and laughing and feeling terrified and relieved all at the same time. Everything about my life suddenly made sense, why I'd never felt that spark that other women talked about, why intimacy with my husband had always felt like I was going through the motions. Why I'd thrown myself so completely into work and friendships instead of focusing on our relationship. Telling him was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Here was this man who just spent months working on himself, being honest about his struggles, trying to rebuild our marriage, and I had to tell him that I'd been living a lie too. Not intentionally, but a lie nonetheless. His reaction surprised me. Instead of anger or devastation, he looked almost relieved. He said he'd always felt like he could never quite make me happy, no matter how hard he tried, and now he understood why. We held each other and cried, mourning the marriage we'd never really had, but somehow grateful that we'd finally found our way to the truth. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly amicable. We divided our assets fairly, and I kept the house since I could afford the payments on my own. He moved into a small apartment closer to where his daughter lived, and for the first time in years he started building a real relationship with her. But the story doesn't end there. Remember how I mentioned that all those pieces of jewelry were gone except for my grandmother's ring? Well, 3 months after our divorce was finalized, I got a call from a jewelry store across town. A woman had brought in some pieces to sell, and when the jeweler examined them, he noticed they were engraved with initials that matched a missing jewelry report I'd filed with local shops. The woman was my husband's ex-girlfriend, his daughter's mother. Apparently, he'd given her the jewelry as gifts over the past few months, not telling her where they came from. When she found out they were stolen from his wife, she was horrified and immediately tried to return them. She'd been thinking I was some terrible woman who'd refused to accept his daughter, but when she learned the truth, that he'd never even told me about his daughter, she realized how much both of us had been manipulated by his lies. We ended up meeting for coffee, and it was the strangest experience of my life. Here was this woman I'd built up in my mind as some kind of threat to my marriage, and she turned out to be just another person who'd been hurt by his inability to be honest. She was raising his daughter alone, working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and trying to figure out how to help her daughter understand why her father had been absent for so much of her life. His daughter was brilliant and funny and had his eyes but her mother's determination. Meeting her made me realize how much we'd all lost because of his choices. She could have had a stepmother who loved her, I could have had the child I'd always wanted, and her mother could have had support instead of struggling alone. Final update, posted 6 months later. I'm writing this final update from a place I never expected to be genuinely happy and at peace with my life for the first time in years. The journey to get here has been messy and complicated and nothing like what I thought my life would look like, but somehow it's turned out better than I could have imagined. First, the most important update. I'm in a relationship now, and she's incredible. We met at a local bookstore during a poetry reading, and what started as a friendship slowly grew into something deeper. She's patient and kind and makes me laugh until my sides hurt. Being with her has shown me what it feels like to be truly seen and accepted for who I am. Every day I wake up grateful that I finally found the courage to be honest about who I really am. My ex-husband has made remarkable progress in his recovery. He's been gambling-free for over a year now, and more importantly, he's learned to be honest about his struggles instead of hiding them. He's built a genuine relationship with his daughter, who stays with him every other weekend now. Seeing him with her, you can tell he's finally become the father he always wanted to be but was too afraid to try to be. The 3 of us, my ex, his ex-girlfriend, and I have formed an unlikely friendship. We get together once a month for dinner, and our conversations range from co-parenting strategies to career advice to just laughing about the absurdity of our situation. His daughter has started calling me her bonus mom, which makes my heart full in ways I didn't know were possible. I never thought I'd be grateful for finding my husband selling my grandmother's jewelry, but in a strange way, that moment of betrayal led to the most authentic life I've ever lived. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are actually the universe's way of pushing us toward who we're supposed to be. The gambling addiction, the lies, the secret daughter, the stolen jewelry, all of it was devastating at the time, but it forced both of us to confront truths we'd been avoiding. He had to face his addiction and his fear of being vulnerable. I had to face my sexuality and my fear of disappointing the people I loved. We both spent years trying to be who we thought we should be instead of who we actually were. The breakdown of our marriage wasn't really about gambling or lies, it was about 2 people who'd never learned to be honest, even with themselves. I still wear my grandmother's ring on a chain around my neck, but now it represents something different. It's not just a family heirloom, it's a reminder that sometimes losing something precious can lead you to find something even more valuable. I lost a marriage built on lies and found a life built on truth. My ex-husband found his way to being a real father and a recovering addict who's learning to ask for help instead of hiding his struggles. His ex-girlfriend found support and friendship instead of judgment. His daughter found a father who's present and a bonus mom who loves her unconditionally. And I found myself, the real me that I've been hiding for 32 years. The woman I'm with now knows everything about my past, including the complicated relationship I have with my ex-husband's family. She's never once made me feel like I need to choose between my new life and the people who've become my chosen family. She understands that love isn't always romantic and family isn't always blood. Sometimes people ask me if I regret the 8 years I spent married to him, and the answer is no. Those years taught me what I needed to learn about myself, even if I didn't realize it at the time. They brought me to this place, this family, this life that I wouldn't trade for anything. The jewelry that was stolen and sold is mostly gone forever, but I've started a new collection, pieces that represent who I am now instead of who I used to be. My girlfriend gave me a simple silver bracelet for our 6-month anniversary with an inscription that says, "Authentically yours." It's the most beautiful piece of jewelry I've ever owned because it represents the first relationship I've ever had where I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. My ex-husband is engaged now to a woman he met in his recovery group. She knows about his gambling addiction, his daughter, and his complicated past, and she loves him anyway. Watching him with someone who accepts all of him, even the broken parts, makes me happy in a way I didn't expect. He deserves to be loved for who he really is, not who he thinks he should be. His daughter is thriving with all the adults in her life finally being honest with each other and with her. She's smart enough to understand that her father made mistakes but that he's working to be better. She's also old enough to appreciate having so many people who love her, even if our family doesn't look like what she sees on television. The pawn shop owner who helped me find my grandmother's ring has become an unexpected friend. He's taught me a lot about how people end up selling their most precious possessions and how those items carry stories that go far beyond their monetary value. He says he can always tell when someone is selling something they don't want to lose, and he tries to give them hope that they might be able to buy it back someday. Looking back on everything that's happened, I realized that finding my husband selling my grandmother's jewelry wasn't just about catching him in a lie, it was about catching myself in a lie too. I'd been lying to myself about who I was, what I wanted, and what I deserved. That moment in the pawn shop was the beginning of the most difficult and most rewarding journey of my life. Today, I'm sitting in the backyard of the house I once shared with my ex-husband, but now it's truly my home. My girlfriend is inside making dinner while music plays softly from the kitchen. My ex-husband and his daughter are coming over later for our monthly family dinner, and his fiancée is joining us for the first time. His ex-girlfriend and I are planning a surprise birthday party for his daughter next month. It's not the life I thought I wanted, but it's the life I never knew I needed. Sometimes the best things come from the worst moments, and sometimes losing everything you thought you had is the only way to find everything you actually need. I'm grateful for the gambling addiction that forced the truth into the open. I'm grateful for the lies that made honesty necessary. I'm grateful for the betrayal that led to self-discovery. And I'm grateful for the broken marriage that taught me what real love actually feels like. My grandmother's ring hangs close to my heart, a reminder that some things are worth fighting for, worth buying back, worth treasuring. But the most valuable thing I've learned is that the most precious possession any of us can have is the courage to be authentically ourselves, no matter how scary or complicated that might be. The story that started with betrayal and theft has become a story about redemption and truth and the beautiful mess of human relationships. None of us are perfect, but we're all perfectly imperfect together, and that's turned out to be more than enough.